He had lived on that ranch for most of his adult life. The land was wide, quiet, and honest. Every morning, he woke up to the sound of wind moving through dry grass and the soft noise of animals starting their day. There were no city sirens, no crowded streets, and no neighbors close enough to complain. The ranch had been his escape from rules, noise, and pressure. Out there, life followed nature, not paperwork. The ranch was not small. It stretched far beyond the dirt road that led to the main gate. There was a wooden fence built years ago, some parts newer, some parts old and leaning. Cattle grazed freely, and a few horses stood near the barn. Nothing fancy. Everything had a purpose. The barn had been repaired many times by hand, not by contractors. Every nail, every plank had a story. He bought the land years before any nearby housing development existed. Back then, the area was open land. A few other ranches, empty fields, and long roads that felt endless. No signs, no rules posted anywhere, and no talk of homeowner groups. That was one of the reasons he chose this place. He wanted freedom. He wanted land that belonged to him and only him. Over time, things slowly changed beyond the far edge of the ranch. Roads were paved. New houses appeared. Then, more houses. Neat rows of homes with clean fences and matching mailboxes started filling the distance. He noticed it, but didn't worry. Those homes were far away, and no one bothered him. He assumed they had their own rules, and he had his ranch. Separate worlds. Life continued peacefully. Days were long, but simple. Mornings meant checking fences, feeding animals, and fixing whatever needed fixing. Afternoons were quieter. Sometimes he sat outside with a cup of coffee, watching clouds drift slowly across the sky. The land felt steady like it always had. One afternoon, everything shifted in a way he did not expect. The mail truck drove up the dirt road and stopped near the gate. That was normal, but the envelope he received later that day was not. It was thick, official-looking, and marked with bold letters on the front. The return address showed a name he didn't recognize. It mentioned a homeowners association. At first he thought it was a mistake. Maybe the mail carrier mixed things up. He stood in the kitchen, holding the envelope, reading the words again. Homeowners Association. That made no sense. He didn't live in a neighborhood. He lived on a ranch. He opened the envelope slowly. Inside were several pages. The tone was firm, almost cold. The letter claimed his property was now under the authority of a nearby HOA. It listed several violations. His fencing was not approved. His livestock was not permitted. His structures did not meet appearance standards. There was also a warning about fines if changes were not made within a short time. He read the letter twice, then a third time. His hands tightened slightly, not from fear, but from confusion mixed with disbelief. Nothing in that letter felt real. He walked outside with the papers still in his hand. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the land. The cattle moved slowly, unaware that someone somewhere had decided they were a problem. He looked at the fence mentioned in the letter. That fence had been there before most of those houses even existed. He had never agreed to any HOA. He had never signed anything. No one had asked him. No one had warned him. And yet, here was a letter acting as if all of this was already settled. That night, he barely slept. His mind kept returning to the same questions. How could they do this? How could an organization claim authority over land they never owned? The letter felt like an insult, but also like a threat. The next morning, he decided not to panic. He believed in facts. He believed in paperwork. Somewhere, there had to be proof that the ranch was not part of any association. He knew when he bought the land, there were no such rules. Later that day, he drove into town. The small county office building was old, with faded paint and a quiet lobby. He spoke with a clerk and asked about property boundaries. The clerk searched records and told him it might take time to pull older documents. That answer didn't comfort him, but it didn't scare him either. On his way back, he stopped at a small local store, the kind of place where people still talk to each other. He mentioned the letter casually to someone he recognized from years ago. The reaction was immediate. Raised eyebrows. A slow shake of the head. That person told him he wasn't the first to get a strange letter. The HOA from the new development had been pushing boundaries. Literally. They wanted control over nearby land to protect property values. Some people had given in without question. Others were fighting back. That information changed how he felt. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a move. Over the next few days, more letters arrived, each one more demanding than the last. The language became sharper. Deadlines were mentioned. Fines were clearly listed. Still, no one showed up in person. It was all paper and pressure. He stayed calm, but inside something heavy began to settle. This ranch was not just land. It was years of work. It was peace. It was the place he planned to stay for the rest of his life. The idea that strangers could tell him how to live on it made his chest feel tight. He began gathering everything he had. Old purchase documents, maps, tax records, anything with dates. He spread them out on the table one evening, carefully comparing lines and numbers. The documents were old, some yellowed at the edges, but they were clear. The ranch boundaries were defined long before the HOA even existed. Still, doubt crept in. He knew organizations had lawyers. He was just one person. The thought of legal trouble was not something he enjoyed. He preferred fixing fences to fighting paperwork battles. One afternoon, a car slowed near the gate. It didn't stop, but it didn't speed past either. It felt intentional. He watched it from a distance. The window was up. The driver didn't wave. That moment made things feel real in a new way. This was no longer just letters. Someone was watching. He stood by the gate for a long time after the car left. The wind moved through the grass again, just like always. But the peace felt thinner now, fragile. That evening, he made a decision. He would not ignore this. He would not rush either. He would respond, but on his terms, calmly, carefully, with proof, as the sun set behind the hills. He looked across his land and felt something stronger than fear, determination. Whatever this HOA thought they could take, they were wrong. The ranch had stood long before them, and he intended to make sure it stayed that way. That was only the beginning. The days after the letters arrived were tense. Every sound from the road made him pause, wondering if it was someone from the HOA coming to see if he had made any changes. Even though no one had shown up yet, the letters alone were enough to make him feel watched. He moved carefully around the ranch, fixing fences and checking gates. But now, he did it with a sense that someone might be watching every move. It felt strange. He had never been watched before. He began to notice small changes around the land. Some of the neighbors in the new development seemed to glance his way more often. Cars slowed when passing by. At first, he thought he was imagining things, but the feeling of pressure only grew stronger. It was almost as if the HOA had sent invisible eyes onto his ranch. The next letter came a few days later. This one was longer, more detailed, and even more demanding. It mentioned penalties if he did not correct the so-called violations. It criticized the appearance of his barn, the fencing, and even the number of animals he kept. Every word was written as if they had the power to change his life overnight. But the ranch owner knew better. He knew his land. He knew his rights. And he wasn't about to give up without evidence and preparation. Instead of panicking, he started keeping a journal. Every letter, every interaction, every strange vehicle passing by was written down in detail. He also began taking photographs of the property, the fences, the barn, the animals. He needed proof that he was living as he always had, peacefully, with nothing harming anyone. The journal became a source of strength. Each day he wrote calmly and clearly, recording facts without emotion. It helped him feel in control. Even though he tried to stay calm, stress was hard to avoid. The ranch had always been a safe place, and now it felt like a battlefield. Sometimes, late at night, he would sit in the living room with the dim light of a lamp. Staring at the papers from the HOA, he thought about the countless hours he had spent on the land. Sweat, the repairs, the animals. All that work had value. It wasn't something anyone could just tell him to change. Neighbors, who had lived in the area longer than the HOA existed, started to visit him. They shared their own experiences with the association. Some were careful, some were angry, and some had simply paid fines to avoid conflict. Their stories showed a pattern. The HOA often tried to enforce rules on people who had been living in the area long before the organization even existed. It was a mix of intimidation and authority, designed to make people feel helpless. The ranch owner listened to all these stories carefully. He didn't make quick decisions. He was determined to act wisely. He realized this was more than just paperwork. It was about respect and the principle of standing up for what was right. If he gave in without proof or fight, it might seem like the land belonged to someone else. That thought made him resolve to be patient but firm. The next few weeks were a mix of routine and vigilance. Mornings began with feeding animals and checking fences. But now he also checked the mail carefully, looking for letters or notices. Afternoons were for repairs and organization. Even the smallest tasks became important. Every nail driven into a fence post, every plank replaced in the barn, and every document organized on the desk felt like preparation for a larger battle. The ranch had become both a home and a fortress. Then one afternoon, he noticed a car parked near the end of the road that led to his ranch. It wasn't moving. The engine was off. The driver sat inside, staring in his direction. For a moment, the ranch owner considered going over to speak, but then he decided against it. He stayed on the porch, watching. The car remained there for a while, then finally drove away slowly. The experience was unnerving, but it also confirmed his fears. This was more than letters now. Someone was monitoring him. He decided it was time to be proactive. He began writing letters back to the HOA, not with anger, but with facts. He requested clarification about boundaries, asked for official maps, and demanded proof that the ranch fell under their jurisdiction. He wrote each letter carefully, double-checking every word. It was important that he remained calm and professional. Any sign of rash behavior could be used against him. As the days went on, the pressure continued. More letters arrived, each more insistent than the last. Some threatened legal action if he did not comply. Others suggested fines would increase rapidly. Even though the tone was harsh, he didn't panic. He responded in kind, calmly, and logically. He relied on facts, records, his knowledge of the property. Friends and local community members continued to offer support. Some had faced similar challenges and offered advice. They suggested contacting county officials or legal experts who understood property rights and HOA boundaries. Others simply offered encouragement, telling him he was doing the right thing by standing his ground. Their support helped him stay focused and confident. The ranch itself became a place of quiet resistance. Every fence repaired, every barn door fixed, every field properly maintained was a message in itself. It showed that he cared for the land and lived responsibly. The HOA's claims of neglect or improper maintenance had no basis in reality. Slowly, the ranch owner felt more in control. The land was his, and he would protect it. At night, he would sometimes sit outside, looking at the stars. The wind moved softly through the trees, and the animals were calm. In those moments, he remembered why he had chosen this life. It wasn't just about property or letters. It was about freedom, independence, and a connection to the land. No amount of threats could take that away. Still, he knew the battle was far from over. Each day brought new challenges, and he had to remain vigilant. But he also learned that patience, preparation, and calm determination were his greatest tools. By keeping detailed records, photographs, and journals, he had built a strong foundation to defend his home. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The HOA seemed to focus their efforts on intimidation rather than legal accuracy. They assumed that fear would force compliance. But the ranch owner refused to be intimidated. Instead, he used every tool at his disposal to prove his independence. The combination of careful documentation, community support, personal experience gave him confidence. One morning, a neighbor from the older ranch nearby came by. They brought coffee and a small map from years ago, showing land boundaries long before the HOA had existed. It was a simple piece of paper, yellowed with age, but it spoke volumes. The map confirmed that the ranch was never part of the HOA, holding it in his hands. The ranch owner felt a sense of relief mixed with renewed determination. The fight was real, but so was the proof. Even with this evidence, he knew he couldn't relax. The HOA had lawyers and resources, and he had only knowledge, records, and patience. But he believed in truth and in facts. He would continue to document every interaction, keep every letter, and make sure the story of his ranch was clear, undeniable, and respected. Days passed, blending into weeks. The land remained his sanctuary, and he continued his routine with a careful balance of vigilance and calm. He began to see the HOA's tactics for what they were: pressure and intimidation, not legitimate claims. That awareness brought strength. The ranch was more than land. It was his life's work, his peace, and his identity. Nothing could change that. As the sun set on another day, he stood by the fence and looked across the wide fields. The animals grazed peacefully. The wind moved through the grass, and the sky glowed in shades of orange and pink. It reminded him why he fought, why he documented, and why he refused to give in. This was not just a battle over rules. It was a fight for respect, for freedom, and for the life he had built with his own hands. The letters, the cars, and the threats were only obstacles. The ranch itself remained a place of truth and calm determination. In that quiet moment, he knew the fight was just beginning. But he also knew he was ready. He would face the pressure calmly, respond with facts, and never lose sight of what truly mattered: the land he had nurtured and the life he had built. Whatever came next, he would meet it with patience, courage, and the confidence that comes from knowing you are right. And that was a power no letter or threat could ever take away. He spent the following days gathering all documents related to the ranch: deeds, property maps, tax records, old bills for repairs and construction, all of it. Everything that could prove the land had been his for decades. He organized the papers carefully on the kitchen table, making stacks, highlighting dates, and noting details. Every piece of paper was a story of the work he had done and the life he had built. This process gave him both focus and hope. With the documentation ready, he decided to visit the county offices again. The building looked the same as it always had, with paint faded and the small parking lot usually quiet. Inside, he explained to the clerk that he needed older records and maps to confirm the boundaries of his property. The clerk nodded politely, understanding the seriousness of the request. He had to wait a while as they pulled out dusty files from deep within the storage room. When the clerk returned with the records, began to carefully compare everything. The county maps clearly showed the ranch was never included in any HOA dates. Boundary lines and official notes all confirmed that the land had always been independent. Holding the maps in his hands, he felt a sense of relief, mixed with determination. The proof was there, undeniable and clear. However, he knew the HOA might try to argue otherwise. They could claim newer maps or different interpretations. He could not rely on hope alone. He needed every possible piece of evidence. So he went further. He contacted a surveyor, someone experienced and trusted in the area. The surveyor visited the ranch and measured boundaries, fences, and structures. His report would add another layer of proof, showing that the land lines and ownership were as he claimed. While the legal preparations were ongoing, he also began to communicate with the HOA. Each letter he wrote was precise and factual. He asked questions, requested proof, and presented copies of the old maps. He kept the tone professional, avoiding anger or threats. He understood that losing control of his emotions could be used against him. Every word had to reflect calm, confidence, and evidence. Despite the careful planning, the pressure continued. The HOA continued sending letters, sometimes escalating the tone. They mentioned fines, deadlines, and even possible legal action. Still, he stayed calm. He knew that reacting hastily would not help. He responded only after reviewing every claim, every document, and every possibility. The local community started to play a more active role. Older ranchers, neighbors who had lived in the area for decades, offered their support. Some shared old maps and documents. Others gave advice on how to handle the HOA. Their collective knowledge helped him feel less isolated. It also reinforced the idea that the HOA's demands were not reasonable. This was a fight that many had quietly witnessed before, and history was on his side. He also took time to educate himself. He read property law guides, county regulations, and local ordinances. He wanted to be fully aware of his rights, responsibilities, and options. Knowledge, he realized, was a powerful tool. The more he knew, the less the letters could intimidate him. Every fact he learned became a shield against uncertainty. One morning, working on the barn, he noticed a small group of cars parked near the end of the road. People stepped out, walking slowly toward the property line. At first, he was tense. Were they from the HOA? Were they trying to intimidate him? But as they approached, he recognized a few familiar faces, longtime neighbors. They had come to offer support and advice. Their presence was a reminder that he was not alone. It strengthened his resolve. The surveyor's report arrived a few days later. Every measurement, every boundary, every observation confirmed the ranch's independence. The report was professional, detailed, and undeniable. With it in hand, he felt ready to face the HOA with facts that could not be ignored. Before confronting the HOA directly, he decided to prepare one final package of evidence. He included the original property deeds, county maps, surveyor reports, photographs, and notes from the local community. Every detail was documented carefully, with clear labels and dates. It was a meticulous collection of evidence designed to make the truth undeniable. Then, made an appointment for a formal meeting with the HOA. He was nervous, but also confident. The meeting would be the first real face-to-face encounter, and he wanted to ensure he was prepared. He knew the power of patience, preparation, and calm presentation. Everything depended on the ability to remain composed and clear. The day of the meeting arrived. He drove slowly down the familiar roads, observing the land around him. The new houses, the neat fences, and the manicured lawns stood in contrast to his own ranch, but it did not matter. His life, his work, and his independence were the foundation of what he had built at the HOA office. He was greeted politely, but with a hint of skepticism. They assumed he would be easy to pressure. He remained calm. He presented his documentation, carefully explaining every detail. The maps, deeds, and surveyor report formed a clear picture. The HOA representatives began to look uncertain as he spoke. Each question he asked, each clarification he made, revealed gaps in their claims. He also shared evidence from the community. Longtime residents confirmed that the ranch existed before the HOA. Their statements, combined with physical records, created a strong case. The atmosphere shifted. What had started as a routine enforcement meeting turned into a careful examination of facts. The representatives could no longer speak confidently about authority. The ranch's history, clearly documented, was undeniable. Throughout the meeting, he remained calm. He knew emotions could be used to discredit him. He focused on facts, evidence, and clarity. Every document he presented told a story of a ranch that had existed for decades, cared for responsibly, and never subject to the HOA's rules. The meeting ended with the representatives acknowledging the complexity of the situation. They needed to review the materials, consult records, and reconsider their position. As he left the office, he felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The battle was not fully over, but the tide had begun to turn. The ranch had a history that could not be ignored. The evidence was strong. He felt a sense of accomplishment for preparing thoroughly, remaining calm, standing his ground. Back at the ranch, he walked across the fields, touching the fences and the barn walls. Every corner of the land told a story of care, work, and dedication. The animals moved freely, unaware of the ongoing struggle, yet part of the life he had fought to protect. He felt pride in what he had built, knowing that preparation, patience, and persistence were now his strongest allies. Evenings became a time for reflection. He sat on the porch, looking at the sunset, thinking about the past and what lay ahead. The letters, the pressure, and the threats had tested him, but they also revealed his own strength. The ranch was more than land. It was a testament to years of effort and integrity. Protecting it was not just about rules, It was about respect, truth, and standing for what was right. He knew the HOA might continue to resist, might try new strategies, or push further. But he also knew that the truth, carefully documented and calmly presented, was on his side. Each day, as he cared for the land, repaired fences, and tended animals, he felt more certain that the ranch could withstand any challenge. And so, the preparation, the research, the careful documentation, and the support of the community became the foundation of his defense. Every action he took was intentional, every word in the letters measured, and every conversation approached with clarity and calm. This was more than a fight. It was a process of protecting a life built with care, wisdom, and patience. He ended the day looking across the wide fields, feeling the wind, listening to the animals, and knowing that he had done everything possible to stand firm. The ranch was his, and the truth was on his side. Whatever the HOA tried next, he would meet it with knowledge, evidence, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are right. The battle continued, but now he was ready. The day for the formal meeting arrived with a quiet sense of tension. He woke up early, as he always did, to check the animals and the fences. Everything needed to be in order, not because anyone from the HOA could comment on the land in reality, but because he felt that he should present himself as someone responsible and careful. Every detail mattered, every action reflected the life he had built on that ranch. He packed a folder carefully. It contained all the evidence he had collected, the original deeds, county maps, surveyor reports, photographs of the property, and copies of previous letters. Each document had been double-checked, dates verified, and information highlighted to make it easy to follow. He wanted to ensure there could be no misunderstanding, no room for argument. The facts were clear, and he intended to make them undeniable. Driving down the dirt road toward the meeting location, he noticed the familiar landscape. The wind moved through the trees, the cattle grazed quietly, and the sun was warm on his face. For a moment, the tension eased. He reminded himself that this was his life, his ranch, and the strength he carried came from decades of living here. Not from fear of a letter or an organization. The HOA office was modern compared to the county building, with polished floors, neat rows of chairs, and a reception desk. When he arrived, he was asked to wait. He sat calmly, flipping through his notes, rehearsing how he would present the facts. His mind ran over the documents again, ensuring he could answer any question that might arise. Soon, the HOA representatives entered. They carried an air of confidence, assuming that this would be a routine matter. But as he handed over his folder and began to explain, the tone of the room began to shift. He started by calmly stating the history of the ranch, how long it had been in existence, and how the property had never been included in any HOA. He presented the old maps, pointing out the boundaries clearly. He showed the surveyor's report, detailing measurements and confirming property lines. The representatives exchanged glances. They tried to interject, mentioning newer maps or standards, but he responded with facts. Each statement was backed by evidence. There was no room for speculation, no space for opinion. The clarity and organization of his presentation made it hard for them to argue. The more he spoke, the more confident he became, and the more uncertain the representatives appeared. He also presented the letters from the community, neighbors who had lived in the area for decades. Their statements confirmed that the ranch had always been independent. The combination of documents, maps, surveys, and community testimony created a picture that could not easily be ignored. The representatives paused, reviewing the materials carefully. They realized that their assumptions had been based on incomplete information, and now they were faced with undeniable facts. Throughout the meeting, he remained composed. He spoke clearly, avoided anger, and answered questions with evidence. His calm presence contrasted with the attempts by the HOA to pressure him. Each time they tried to challenge a point, he responded with documented proof. His preparation, patience, and persistence became his strongest allies. At one point, one of the representatives suggested that perhaps some compromise could be reached. He listened, but did not agree without reason. Compromise would only make sense if the facts supported it. He could not compromise on truth, on property he had owned and maintained for decades. With respect, he declined, showing that his decision was based on knowledge, not emotion. As the meeting progressed, the representatives began to realize the weight of the evidence. Their arguments weakened, their confidence faded. He could see the change in their expressions. The initial assumption that he would be intimidated was gone. Instead, they had to consider reality. The ranch was independent, and all claims of violations were unfounded. By the end of the meeting, there was a noticeable shift. The HOA representatives acknowledged that they needed to review the documents further, to consult additional records, and to reconsider their position. He left the office knowing that he had presented the truth clearly and that the facts were on his side. He felt a sense of accomplishment and relief, but he also knew the process was not yet fully complete. Back at the ranch, he walked across the fields, touching fences and barn walls. The land felt alive, a tangible reminder of everything he had worked for. The animals grazed quietly, unaware of the struggle happening beyond the property lines. But their presence brought him calm. Each step he took on the soil reminded him that this was his life, built with effort, patience, and integrity. In the following days, letters from the HOA slowed. They began responding to his requests for clarification, reviewing maps and documents carefully. The pressure was still there, but it had softened. The intimidation tactics no longer had the same impact. His calm, evidence-based approach had changed the dynamic. He continued his daily routine, feeding animals, checking fences, repairing structures, and maintaining the land. Every task was performed with care, as if each nail and plank carried the weight of the ongoing challenge. Yet, despite the continued presence of the HOA, he felt more confident and grounded than ever before. The community around him remained supportive. Longtime neighbors visited, offering advice, encouragement, and occasionally just companionship. Their stories, experiences, and knowledge reinforced the idea that the ranch was independent and that standing firm was the right course of action. The collective history of the area became a powerful reinforcement of his position. At night, he often sat outside, looking at the stars, reflecting on the events of the day. The wind moved softly through the grass, and the quiet of the land reminded him why he had chosen this life. The ranch was not just property, it was his home, his work, his sanctuary. The battle with the HOA was a test, but it also highlighted the strength, patience, and resilience he had built over the years. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The HOA's attempts to pressure him were based on assumptions, not facts. Their letters, deadlines, and fines relied on intimidation rather than evidence. By remaining calm, prepared, and focused, he had shifted the balance of power. Each response, each piece of documentation, and each community statement strengthened his position. As weeks passed, he felt a growing sense of security. The ranch remained peaceful, the animals content, and the land thriving. The HOA's influence had diminished in the face of clear evidence and careful presentation. The lessons learned during this period were valuable. Preparation, patience, and knowledge could overcome intimidation and uncertainty. He also realized that the fight had changed him. He had become more aware of his rights, more confident in his ability to protect his property, more appreciative of the community that supported him. The ranch was more than a place to live. It was a symbol of persistence, integrity, and truth. Each evening, as the sun set across the wide fields, he would stand and look at the horizon. The land, the animals, and the quiet reminded him of what truly mattered. The letters and threats were temporary, but the ranch, built over decades, was permanent. He knew that no organization, no matter how insistent, could take away the life he had built. He prepared for any future challenges with calm determination, knowing that facts, evidence, and patience were stronger than intimidation. The ranch was safe, not because of confrontation, but because of truth. The quiet strength of preparation and the unwavering respect for his land became the foundation for the next steps. As the night deepened, he walked along the fence line, feeling the cool air and listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch. Each corner of the property, each structure, and each field told a story of care and resilience. The struggle with the HOA had been intense, but it also revealed the strength of standing firm. The ranch remained his, and the truth was unshakable. Whatever came next, he would face it with clarity, patience, and confidence, knowing that he had built a life that could withstand challenge, scrutiny, and doubt. In the days following the meeting, he waited for a response from the HOA. The anticipation was tense, but he remained calm. He continued his daily routine, feeding animals, checking fences, and maintaining the barn. Each task reminded him that the ranch was his life, and caring for it was both grounding and empowering. The sun rose and set as it always had, and the land remained steady, a silent witness to his persistence and patience. Finally, a letter arrived, more formal than any before. It was from the HOA, and the tone was different. The previous threats and fines were gone. Instead, the letter acknowledged the evidence he had presented and stated that they were withdrawing all claims against his property. They admitted that the ranch had always been independent and that their previous actions were based on incorrect assumptions. Holding the letter, he felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The battle was finally over. He read the letter carefully, making sure every word was clear. The HOA was essentially apologizing without saying the word directly. Their authority over his land had been overestimated. Now it was officially recognized that they had no right to enforce any rules on his ranch. The validation of his efforts, the patience, and the careful documentation felt like a quiet victory. It was a reminder that knowledge and preparation could overcome pressure and intimidation. The community around him shared in the relief. Neighbors visited, some bringing food, others just stopping by to talk. They praised his persistence and admired the way he had handled the situation. Some mentioned that they had been hesitant to stand up to the HOA themselves, but seeing him remain calm and organized gave them courage. The sense of solidarity was comforting and reaffirmed the importance of community support. With the official acknowledgement from the HOA, he felt a renewed sense of freedom. He could tend to his land without the shadow of threats or fines. The fences, the barn, and the fields were his to manage as he saw fit. The animals moved freely, unaware that their home had just been defended in a quiet legal battle. Every morning as he opened the gate and stepped into the fields, he felt a sense of triumph that was deep and enduring. The experience had taught him many lessons. He learned the value of documentation, the importance of understanding legal boundaries, and the power of patience. The letters and threats had been intimidating, but by remaining calm, organized, and factual, he had shifted the balance of power. He realized that preparation and knowledge were more powerful than anger or fear. The battle with the HOA had not changed his love for the ranch, but it had strengthened his confidence and determination. He continued to maintain the land, repairing fences, caring for animals, and keeping the property in excellent condition. The work was never-ending, but it was fulfilling. Every task was a reminder of the independence he had fought to protect. The barn, once criticized by the HOA, stood sturdy and well-maintained. The fences were strong, and the fields were healthy. The ranch was thriving, a testament to his dedication. Over time, he began to reflect on the process. The letters, meetings, and community involvement were all part of a larger story about standing up for oneself. He realized that many people might face similar challenges where rules and authority are imposed unfairly. His experience became an example of how to handle such situations with patience, evidence, and calm persistence. It was not just about winning a battle. It was about demonstrating integrity and resilience. Occasionally, he would receive inquiries from neighbors or others in the community about dealing with similar issues. He shared his story carefully, emphasizing the importance of understanding property rights, documenting facts, and staying calm. He encouraged people to seek community support and professional advice when needed. His experience became a quiet source of guidance, showing that even in challenging situations, it was possible to protect what was rightfully yours. The ranch remained a place of peace and stability. The animals moved freely across the fields, and the barn continued to stand as a symbol of care and responsibility. The wind carried the sounds of nature, and the quiet was unbroken. The land, which had been threatened by outside authority, now stood secure, a reflection of years of work and steadfast dedication. Evenings became a time of reflection. He would sit on the porch looking at the sunset across the fields. The sky, painted with shades of orange and pink, reminded him of the endurance and beauty of the land he had protected. Each day he felt gratitude for the support of the community, the strength of preparation, and the calm resolve that had carried him through. The battle with the HOA had ended, but the lessons and confidence he gained remained. He also began to see the ranch in a new light. The challenge had revealed not only the importance of knowledge and preparation, but also the strength of standing firm in the face of unjust pressure. The land was more than a home. It was a symbol of resilience and independence. Every fence, every field, and every structure represented years of dedication and the ability to protect what truly matters. As the weeks turned into months, the letter from the HOA became a reminder, kept carefully in a safe place. It was evidence that the truth could prevail and that calm, organized action was often the most effective response to intimidation. He continued to work the land, feeling a sense of pride in the life he had built and the principles he had upheld. Occasionally, he would encounter newcomers curious about the ranch or the history of the land. He would share small pieces of the story, focusing on the importance of care, patience, and understanding one's rights. The experience had changed him, making him more aware of the responsibilities and opportunities that come with owning and protecting property. The ranch continued to flourish, the animals healthy and the fields productive. The barn, fences, and other structures remained in excellent condition, reflecting years of consistent care. The land was once threatened by external authority, but now it stood secure, testament to persistence, knowledge, and respect for the truth. Looking back, he realized that the struggle had been both challenging and enlightening. It had required patience, careful planning, and the courage to stand firm. It had shown the value of community support and the importance of remaining calm in the face of intimidation. The victory was not just in the withdrawal of HOA claims, but in the affirmation of independence, integrity, and the ability to protect what mattered most, even in the quiet moments. Standing alone on the wide fields, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The ranch, which had been threatened by letters, meetings, and fines, now stood secure. The animals grazed peacefully, the fences held strong, and the barn remained sturdy. The land, his life's work, had been defended successfully. The experience left a lasting impression. He knew that challenges might arise again, whether from unexpected authority or other pressures. But he also knew that with preparation, patience, and calm determination, any challenge could be met. The ranch was a symbol of resilience, independence, and the enduring power of truth as the sun set each evening. Painting the sky with colors that mirrored the peace of the land, he would walk slowly across the fields, feeling the wind, hearing the sounds of animals, and appreciating the life he had built. The battle with the HOA had ended, but the lessons, confidence, and deep connection to the land would remain forever. The ranch was his, fully protected, and a lasting reminder that patience, knowledge, and calm courage could overcome even the most persistent challenges.